Hello, I'm Stan the History Man, uh, welcoming you to another broadcast of this program. Today we're going to talk about the experts speak and get it wrong. Relatively modern times, 20th century on. And one of the first things would be no one saw World War One coming, no one predicted it. Uh, and if the future war, if there would be war, because a lot of people are thinking then war is kind of every countries are so allied together and there's such interchangeability, global uh, economic structures. We wouldn't be crazy enough to go to war and destroy all that wealth. Well, we did, but they did think if it did kind of be the same type of charging by horse charging, infantry attacks, and so on, and that's what the militant powers did early in the World War One. The French, the fury of the élan that would overcome any advantages that Germany had or any enemy of France would have, and they were slaughtered in the earliest well year of World War One, and it took almost to the end of the war before they realized that the machine gun especially had made a real difference. And after the war, then period of prosperity in the 1920s, I think it should be pointed out also, which it never has been that I know of, that in the 1920s we had no war. And I'm talking globally, not just the United States or anything. There were colonial skirmishes, punch ups, and so on, but nothing really that. And so it's kind of understandable when we talk about how we disarmed between the wars. Well, that's one reason why. Well, in the 20s, lots of wars in the 30s. Why we did that, because you look it up yourself and look up wars. And once the Turkish-Greek War ended, Turks and Greeks always hate each other. That was it. Um, so anyway, now of course no one saw the depression. And when I say no one, I mean there probably were some village philosophers or local bank president or something say this can't go on, all this prosperity. But basically, it hit like an unforeseen ton of bricks, the Great Depression. And now this one of the I think a good example of how the experts get it wrong, and I would say almost always get it wrong, would be the President's Temporary National Economic Commission. This was set up in 1939 by President Roosevelt, getting all the big domes together, all the great economists from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, whatever, and they were going to plot or chart the future of the United States, particularly economically. And so I think they had 4 or 5 volumes and so, which nobody reads now. And they concluded that the United States had reached a quote mature unquote economy. Well, that almost everything they predicted never happened. They didn't see commercial airline until people would be using trains right for the foreseeable future. They certainly never saw the electronic revolution, where they had radio by then already, but television was around. But they didn't see it. There were no really commercial television stations going in 1939, but they didn't foresee anything like that. You look at the progress of technology then. The television at the World's Fair of 1939, 1940, that should have given them a tip off, but it didn't. So they were completely wrong. And of course, they didn't see World War II, which just threw everything into the melting pot that we'd had before. And I think you don't hear anything about that. Maybe a scholarly book, a text on the Great Depression might talk about it very, very briefly, but it was just about everything they got it wrong. So war itself, well, I can't go into World War II, the greatest catastrophe in human history, and the greatest operation activity in human history. From the start, one thing I would point out was the Air Force probably got it, the U.S. Air Force, U.S. Army Air, well, first Army Air Corps and then Army Air Forces, was that the future war would just be bombers bombing each other's cities, and also maybe with poison gas. And that would, I guess, the country had the fewest bombers or the worst production or protection rather, would have to surrender first of all. And a lot of people died trying to prove that thing, which see, it was unescorted bombers. And until our bombers were not escorted, the RAF and the USAAF were slaughtered in their attempt to attack Germany. In fact, the British got it so wrong in their they really they would practice bombing on a clear day in a field marked with a circle. And even then, they often didn't get inside. The circle is about 100 yards in diameter, and often they missed that. And when the war began, and over the much more cloudy conditions and at a higher altitude, and of course the tests had no opposition either. And with Germans fighting back, shooting at them, they sometimes missed the target so much that the Germans honestly wondered what city were they attacking. The bombs landed in a cow pasture or something like that. What trying to figure out what city were they attacking? So that was of course, the kind of prognostication as though it was like utopian. Okay. Anyway, moving on from World War. Towards the end of the war, there was a lot of planning going on with the Allies. What are we going to do with the end of the war? The Japanese, the Germans weren't worried about what's going to happen after the war. They were just surviving by the end of the war, which didn't end until wartime. We started selling supplies and all military equipment to Britain and France. When those contracts are finished, and you have 12 million young men hitting the streets, hitting the bricks, as they used to say, looking for work. Well, where are they going to find it? Well, just the opposite happened. You have a period not of depression, but of inflation, and not a period of unemployment, but of pretty much steady employment. And they're probably right. But they said it afterwards, okay? In fact, the slogan was the bread line in 49 during the war. Like they thought the war would go until 1949. The bread line in 49, or under the Golden Gate in 48 and 49, the bread line. So that was a very popular opinion at the time. That, in fact, I would say that no really big time academic economists foresaw what came after the war. The inflation that it was so bad that the Democrats who had won the war, Roosevelt and then Harry Truman, lost control of Congress, which brings me to another thing. Because Truman was facing so much trouble in the 3 years after the war, when he's up for election on his own, 1948, and this is a pretty well-known story, all the experts again said, well, Truman's got a lot of baggage, and he's certainly not Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Whereas Dewey he'd been the candidate in 44 and had lost pretty badly, but still Dewey was not a likable person, but nonetheless the Republicans nominated him. And not only did Dewey lose, and here's something a lot of even historians don't talk about much, not only did the Democrats win the presidency, they won the House and the Senate, not by big majorities, but enough that Truman get across his fair deal program. And it looked like that would be going on for quite a while.